Hello, and welcome to the Fundraising Breakthrough Summit. This summit is all about giving you expert insights to grow donations, deepen supporter relationships, and build lasting financial stability for your organization. I'm your host, Athena Williamson, and today's conversation centers around one of the most timeless and most urgent truths about fundraising. Fundraising is all about relationships. Joining us today is someone who embodies that message in every aspect of his career, Dr. Rob Harter. Rob is a seasoned nonprofit executive with over 30 years of social impact leadership experience. He now serves as a nonprofit consultant and certified professional coach, working with leaders and organizations across the sector. He's a sought-after speaker, seminar facilitator, and founder and host of the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast, one of the most respected shows in our field. Rob has also served as a member and contributor for the Forbes Nonprofit Council and was invited to join Harvard Business School's Young American Leaders Program. He's also a certified Enneagram instructor and a trained neurofeedback technician, bringing deep insight into human behavior, motivation, and leadership. So, Rob, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you with us today.
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So, Rob, let's just get started. You've been in this field a really long time. Can you
Yeah.
just share a little bit about your story and what brought you into the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, I'm one of those that you call a lifer when it comes to the nonprofit social impact sector. I personally was impacted by people when I was even young, a teenager, that were in the mission-driven sector working with nonprofits. And I just thought, oh, wow, I really want to be a part of that kind of environment. I want to be part of organizations that are really making a difference in our world, in our communities. And so right away, I knew when I went to college, I wanted to really dedicate myself to serving in the nonprofit sector, for lack of a better term, whatever that would be. And so I've been in a variety of roles, but it's always been in a mission-driven organization. I like being around people that are mission-driven. And I think I just realized my personal drive as a person, I'm more like fired up and excited and really seek to have opportunities where I have an impact on people or communities more than just getting a paycheck. So I really wanted to always be part of organizations that truly had a mission as their focus. And that's really what drove me as a person and continues to drive me. And so that led to me to all kinds of different opportunities, as I mentioned before, just some various organizations I've served in. And then it led me, then fast forward, I was recently a CEO of a humanitarian organization for about 14 years. And then last year, I knew I was ready for a new change and something different. And that's when I went into creating my own business to do my own coaching and consulting. And what drives me now, Athena, is really this idea that if you want to change an organization, you change the leadership. And so if I had the opportunity, what I was looking forward to was if I could work with leaders that are leading these organizations, these nonprofit organizations, and help them dream bigger or help remove some of the barriers that are holding them back or help lift some of the burdens they were dealing with so that they could lead better, I would then have an impact on these organizations. And you actually see these organizations get better and expand their impact. And so by impacting again the leader, you're impacting these organizations. And so now it's such a privilege and honor. It's so rewarding to work with so many multiple organizations as opposed to just being committed to one organization.
Yeah, I love that, and that's such an inspirational path, and I'm glad you've made it into this space and stuff.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
let's just kind of dive into the big picture. So
Yeah.
you've been involved in so many things. What have you seen as some of those biggest challenges facing the social impact sector right now when it like comes to giving and fundraising?
Yes, this is a big question. I'm glad you're asking it. It is a major issue. You're right, Athena. Ever since COVID, we saw this mixed result, right? In fact, I'll back up. If you look at the trend line of giving to nonprofits and charities, it was already going down before COVID, and then it
Yeah.
did spike. And so we saw this initial spike with giving to all kinds of great causes, humanitarian organizations, and then it went back down to quote normal, and it started, continuing to go down. And then this last year in the American context, the North American context specifically, we had this major move to cut federal funding across the board in the
Mm.
United States again, and that impacted state giving as well. So what we're facing now is organizations that really depended on a lot of federal or state grants have had to cut back their budgets, cut back their staff by 20, 30, maybe 40%. So that's a tremendous amount of cutting, particularly if you have a lot of people that are depending on you. And then, in addition to that, there's individual foundations, other grants, corporations, even, and individuals that just give to these great causes. Well, now there's more people asking them for money
Yeah.
because the federal grants have dried up, the state grants have been cut. And so now you have foundations. Maybe if you're listening, you're a nonprofit leader right now, and you're like, yes, I used to get X amount of dollars from this particular foundation, and they cut that by a third. It's because they're giving to more organizations. More organizations are asking for that money because there's more pressure, if you will, on private funding or foundations to give to these nonprofits. And so that's kind of a double whammy, if you will, the cuts in the first place, and then there's just less money in a sense right now to go around, or people feel like they have to spread their gifts to multiple organizations. So you may get less funding from individuals or foundations that you used to get larger amounts. So that really is a challenge, I think, right now. And so I think nonprofit leaders always have dealt with fundraising challenges, but I think it's even more acute now.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's been such a challenge. And, it's an ever evolving, ever moving challenge too, to
It
keep pace
is.
with
That's
it.
right. Hmm.
And you've touched on this and we've heard that term crisis in giving, so
Yeah.
there's this like crisis that we're hearing about. And from your perspective, is that actually a fair way to describe what's happening across the social impact space?
It's a good point, and I like that you're asking this question because I think we use crisis a lot and maybe too much sometimes in the
Yeah,
nonprofit sector. So I would say that may be a little bit of a stretch, but I would say this, that it is an issue and it's a problem, and it's something you've got to really get your head around as an organizational leader, as a nonprofit, because as I mentioned earlier, there is a major trend line that is down in terms of giving to charities and nonprofits, and that's been going on for a while. So to reverse that trend is difficult. And then you add, I think, yeah, with all the other cuts we just talked about. So then one other piece that's kind of weighing this down, I think, when it comes to people giving to nonprofits, or I should say, not giving to nonprofits, for some organizations, not all, of course, but some, there's even a credibility gap that has happened where people maybe don't trust a nonprofit or they've had a bad experience or whatever.
yeah,
And so it doesn't take much for people to say, I don't know if I'll give to that organization anymore for whatever reason, right? It may not even be fair. It may even be based on the actual facts, but they have this sense that that's not a good place for me to invest my money because they had a bad experience over here. Then they apply that to all nonprofits. So I think, yes, is it a crisis? Maybe not, but it is a serious issue that if you don't get your head around, you are going to experience a drop in giving, and it'll continue to be a problem where then all of a sudden you can't pay your payroll, and all of a sudden maybe you have to
yeah.
seriously consider maybe closing your doors. So what do you do? And I know we're going to get into that, but I think just owning up to the fact this is a major issue. If you're not paying attention to re-looking at and reanalyzing how you're doing your development and your fundraising, you need to, because what used to work even a couple of years ago is not necessarily working anymore, or it's not as effective. So you have to really re-up some of your strategies in different ways to connect with people in a new way.
Yeah, no, that it's seriously been a challenge. Even more recently, that nonprofits have seen they're gonna have to start transitioning some things, and we'd hate to see them close their programs like that. And
Exactly. That's right.
you know, um, you touched on this too. So I know that you study and track trends. I know
Yeah.
that you're a big proponent of knowing what's going on there. So could
Yeah.
you expand a little more on like current giving trends? What are you seeing, and what are some more explicit patterns that have come out for you?
Yeah, so that glad you asked that too, because there are some trends. And so let me just give you a couple examples. I've got some stats actually I'll share with you. So number one, the fourth quarter, I think it's pretty obvious for most people. The fourth quarter of the calendar year is really where you're going to see a lot of your giving. For many nonprofits, that is the largest percentage, over
Yeah,
50% perhaps, comes in that fourth quarter. But if you look at kind of more broadly speaking, the fall in general is a peak season for a lot of nonprofits. For example, for veterans group, it's around 40%.
yeah,
Education groups, it's over 30%. Student groups, over 30% again, giving in the fall. When it comes to the winter, groups like environmental groups, for whatever reason, they get more in the winter. But for example, if you're part of a faith community or religious group community, that giving is actually pretty consistent through all seasons.
Hmm.
So that's not actually so much a seasonal trend. So what I would recommend if I was a consultant for your organization is go look at the last 3 to 5 years of your giving. Find out what your trend is. What are your seasons? Because there are some organizations that have, because maybe their fiscal year ends in June, for example, so you don't follow the normal calendar year, you may get a bunch of giving like towards the end of your fiscal year, which means that could be like May or June, because you do a big push and you want to finish your
Right.
fiscal year really strong. So you may find that, what did that be? I guess that's the second quarter of the calendar year actually is one of your highest times of giving. So figure out what your seasonal trends are and maximize those on the one hand. But the second thing is also true is then start looking at the seasons where you don't get a lot of giving. And
Yeah.
what could you do? Maybe some small tweaks to improve the first quarter or the second quarter or third quarter, whatever is a weak quarter for you. Start putting some time into that and see how you can maybe really even just go from like say a 5% normal giving to 10%, double that, because hopefully you're still going to get the typical fourth quarter calendar year bump, because so many organizations do get that. But boy, if you can bump up the other quarters from 5 to 10% or 5 to 7%, you may just see all of a sudden just these nice increases over time. So that's why I think it's so valuable to understand what your trend is.
No, I love that. And creating some consistency is also going to go a long way to, helping you
Yes,
create that stability that most organizations, especially smaller organizations, just don't have.
that's
Yeah.
right. Exactly. That's right. You're right.
No, that's such a great point. And I know a lot of people, we get so down into the weeds that we forget to go back and look at the data, look at what's happening
Yeah,
with our donors. So,
that's right.
let's switch gears just a little bit because I know
Sure.
that in all the stuff you do, let's talk about something everybody's really curious about. AI and how AI is impacting social impact
Yeah.
organizations today. And, what should leaders know when they begin to adopt or start experimenting with it in their fundraising campaigns?
Yes, great question on that. Number one, you're using AI more than you realize. I think that's number one. I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't know if I'll use AI. Actually, you're already using it. If you do any kind of Google search, a lot of actually things that you use for CRMs, there's built-in AI already. So you're probably
Yeah.
are, no, I'm not probably, you are using AI. You
Yeah.
just don't probably realize it. So the question is not so much, are you using it? It's how you're using it. So that's what I typically work with my clients to say, how can you use AI for good? So when it comes to fundraising, I think that's actually one of the areas of your nonprofit organization you could really maximize AI. So number one of the biggest ways people use AI is for donor analytics. So
Mhm.
helping understand and do it on a broad scale of what is your trend line for giving, for example, what are the trend lines of retention for donors? Understanding your donor better. What kind of programs within your organization do they give to? So all those things can be found through some donor analytics, and AI can really scale that for you. So that's, I think, one of the best ways you can do it. Workflow automations, of course, and just these repetitive tasks, whether that be in fundraising or any other area of your nonprofit. That's where AI I feel like is one of the best applications, is because in a perfect world, in the perfect application of AI is that you want these things that just take a lot of time, but they're repetitive or they're very, in a sense, simple tasks, but they take time. Is by giving it to AI, letting that save you time. The hope is then you have more time for face-to-face interaction with your donors. That
Yeah.
to me is the goal, is utilize AI so that you actually have more time for that personal connection, because nothing can replace an eyeball to eyeball conversation with a donor, right? Or a phone call with a donor. I think even more, or a handwritten note to a donor. Those personal touches that AI can't really do or replicate, that's what you want to have more time to do. And so give those repetitive tasks to AI. And when it comes to fundraising, I think that's a great way to enhance your fundraising.
No, it's a great idea. That's a great idea. Great tip to share and create some more efficiency so that you can have and start building those relationships. And
Yeah.
so I know you teach a lot about relationships and how to turn
Yeah.
those, one-time donors into long-term supporters. What are some simple things or intentional things that fundraisers can do right now to help deepen that donor connection?
Yeah. I think, at the risk of just being really obvious, I just want to say maybe the context is relational intelligence and relational connection is so important. And I think it's even more important now because we're living in the age of AI, right? So much is automated, so much is impersonal. So if you double down on that personal connection, that relational connection, to me, that's where you're really going to see big dividends. So, yeah, three practical ways. Number one, pick up that phone and call your donors, make that zero. I mean, it sounds
So
crazy, but like,
simple.
So simple. That's what I mean. Like, this is not rocket science, but how many people do it? How many of your donors get a personal phone call
People are
from you?
afraid to pick up the phone.
They are. And I found the younger the generation, even my own kids, they may be in the car together and they're texting each other. They're not talking. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, come on,
We don't want to
just
go there.
talk, right? No, it's yeah, exactly. I'm touching on toes with parents here. But yeah, I think it's that personal connection. So, number one, pick up the phone and call. Number two, now here's another practical thing. Now, this is broader than just the relational connection, but showing the demonstrated or measurable impact of someone's donation. So if someone gives to one of your program, say the food pantry, give a story of how you're making a measurable impact in your community by this person's gift. So you tell them that. And the idea would be send an email, maybe a text even, or a handwritten note. Just short, doesn't have to be too long. But again, that personal touch, telling a story of how you use the gift that they gave to make a measurable impact. And then the third one, again, really simple, but again, how many people are doing this intentionally is personally thank your donors. Once the gift comes in, you've told them what you've done with it. Now thank them. You can never thank people again, or too much. You can't thank people too much. So
Yeah.
is that a personal handwritten note? Those are very powerful again in the world of AI. Now, also is a personalized email. There's a lot of people that automate their email thank yous, and that's wonderful at some level. But I think particularly if you're getting at larger gifts, people know when it's an automated, thank you. So either make your automated email really personal, or even better, I think, is actually send that individual email to that person. Or again, pick up the phone. It won't hurt to, first of all, have a connection with them, tell them what you're doing, and then pick up the phone after you've received a gift from them and thank them personally. And you may get their voicemail, but hey, a personal voicemail thank you again will go a long way. So these are
Wow.
things, again,
Yeah.
this is not rocket science. And I feel like it's so obvious, but I'm realizing actually a lot of people are not doing it because I think they're so like, how do I utilize all these great AI tools? How can I maximize the efficiency in my organization? Great questions to ask, but never lose sight of that personal connection. So I'm glad you're emphasizing the relational part because that you can't get rid of that. And I think even more so now because of AI, we should really highlight that.
Yeah, I think, we get so wrapped up in the tools that we overcomplicate it. So I love
Yes.
the three
Well
tips.
said.
Like you said, so simple, so
Yeah.
practical, so, so logical. I mean,
Yeah.
normally, you give a gift to somebody, you expect a thank you. That just seems like the
Yeah.
normal response, right?
Right.
So, and once they've done that, so the goal when you get a donor is that hopefully you retain them. So,
Yeah. That's
but
right.
donor retention continues to be a real challenge for nonprofits. So in
That's
your
right.
experience, what is normal for social impact leaders to expect when, and what should organizations be aiming for in retention?
Right. So 45% approximately is the average donor retention rate for most nonprofits. So 45%. Now, you could see that as good or bad. Like that's under
Yeah.
50%. So, but it's not like 10 or 20%, right? So I would say if you're right around hovering around that 50% mark is a good place. That's on average, I guess. They've also found that if you're a new donor, it drops to more like 18 to 20%. So if you're brand new, retention rate is not as high. But if, say, you've
Okay.
given multiple times, you can be as high as 60% on retention. So, in other words, if people really like your organization, say they've given 2, 3, maybe even 4 years in a row, that's a good sign. And then there's the trend line that they'll continue to give at a 60% rate. So that's higher. So, what should you aim for? Number one, just figure out where is your retention rate now? Like, figure that out. And then
Step
start
one.
to me. Yeah, exactly. Figure that out. And so if it's below 45%, then you need to do some digging and figure out, okay, that's not good. Now, it could be that you're a lot of first time donors. And so maybe if it's around 20%, that's actually average for first time donors. So maybe you realize you've got to get a lot more donors, period. And then in the midst of getting first time donors, you're hopefully, like I said, retaining those donors that have been there for a while. So maybe your emphasis is if you realize, yeah, we've got a lot of first time donors, but we're not keeping them. And so we're not having these long term donors. That may be your primary focus. Let's start working on the current donors this year, really double down and get on our efforts to keep them by the things we just talked about, personalizing things, reaching out to them, giving them a call, writing thank you notes, things like that to really make those donors that have given feel very special. So you can start bumping that up to that, at least that 45 to say 50% range. And then if you find yourself, oh my goodness, we're getting close to that 60%, retention rate, you're doing really well because that's typically only true of people that give multiple times. So that would be, I'd start with that of your range to aim for. And again, I guess the last thing would be a little bit more with my coach coming out of me. Don't beat yourself up too much if you feel like your percentage is really low. Just use it as an opportunity to say, okay, let's retool our retention efforts and let's really start building it from where we are. Even if it's a low percentage, let's just start now and make that one of your goals is to really increase that, say by 5% every year. And just give yourself grace, that sometimes it takes a while to get a good rotation going when it comes to donor retention.
And quite frankly, everybody has to start somewhere. So, and if
That's
you
right.
haven't,
Yeah.
if you haven't figured that out, that's
Yeah.
fine. Like you said, don't beat yourself up. Figure it out
Yeah.
today and
That's
move
right.
on from here. Figure out your plan. So that's
Exactly.
again, super practical, super,
Yeah.
super easy to do. Just take a few minutes and look at your data. But
Exactly.
you do a lot of work with leadership, and I know you have, a lot of psychology and coaching in your background and
Yeah.
stuff. Part of some of the roadblocks in developing the relationships are the motivation, what motivations that they have, what fears, what their values are, their communication style.
That's right.
They, how can people understand to use this to build a stronger relationship with some of our donors?
Yeah, I think too often you feel the pressure as a development director or an executive director of a social impact organization. You feel so much pressure, it becomes very transactional in how you treat
Yeah.
donors.
Yeah.
And that's where you really go wrong. And I understand why people feel the pressure. And it's like, I've got to get through such a big list. It becomes more transactional, not even intentionally. It just kind of de facto because you're so busy, but you really got to resist that. To me, that donors pick up on that. And so the first thing I'd say is remember, these are people. Build that relationship, be relational, right? In your approach, not transactional, relational. And so ask questions. Yeah, figure out what motivates them. What kind of causes are exciting to them. And so I often say is the best way to develop relationships is ask lots of good questions. Truly, like, and genuinely do that. Don't just listen to wait to then you can, oh, I'm going to really hit them with this great fact or whatever. No, truly listen to get to know who they are. I think if I've had success in my background in doing fundraising, it's just really asking lots of good questions and getting to know the person as a person. And maybe even I've done this before where you meet with somebody and I don't even do an act. I just truly get to know them because I want to get to, build a relationship with them. And normally, I mean, for the most part, if you're leading a nonprofit organization or you're a development director, they know what you do, right? People
Yeah.
that, particularly donors who are wise and savvy, they know what you do. They know you're probably going to ask for money eventually. And so I found, and I've been pleasantly surprised that oftentimes I genuinely go into the conversation not planning to do an ask in this particular meeting. I just truly want to make a connection and get to know them and get to know them better. And then at the end, they typically say, well, okay, so what do you want? I know, what do you need actually? Now, they don't say, what do
Let
you
them
want, but
prompt
what
you.
do you need? Yes, they said, okay, what are your needs? And because you really have spent time building that connection. And even if they don't ask that question at the end, now, say you'd start talking to somebody and you thought initially that they were really into housing affordability, for example. And it came out that actually, no, they're really all about animal welfare. And they really want to make sure the animals are taken care of well. Well, then you've learned that. Well, now, if hopefully that's the organization you lead, right? But whatever it is, you learn what motivates them. And people, number one, want to be listened to. And number two, they really want people to then respond to what they're really excited about, what they're passionate about. And so, therefore, you start building those connections and conversations around what they're interested in. And so, if you lead an organization that has multiple program, elements, um, for example, say you are taking care of animals. And so maybe after that meeting you had a month later or 3 weeks later after that meeting, send them a quick picture and say, hey, I just thought of this article that's all about animal welfare that I'm learning about how to get better at this with our organization. I thought you may be interested in this, article. Send them the article. It tells them that you listened, you made a connection, you understand this is what they're passionate about, and they would love it. And that keeps the conversation going. So I think that's where you connect with people as people, not as a transaction. And I think that to me is really where people become very effective with their development connections.
Yeah, no, very so important. And in the same time, you're building that trust with them. So I think
Absolutely.
just,
That's right.
which is such a key part to anybody that's going to donate is having a place of trust that, once they
Yeah,
do donate, you're going to do those things that matter to them. So
exactly. That's right.
that's so great. You know, as we close up here, let me just ask you. So I'm asking everybody, I'm like, what is one action, one thing that our listeners and our viewers today can take away and put in place this week to help strengthen donor relationship? What would you encourage them to do?
Yes, I would do maybe two sides to the same activity. Number one, review your donor list and ask yourself, when was the last time I connected with them? And
Yeah,
so you're
love
kind of
that.
looking at your schedule and reviewing your donor list. Because here's the thing, what again, going back to that transactional approach, if you only contact donors when you're asking for something, it
Yeah,
does come across like you always have your hand out when you meet with people, right? So
yeah,
I did now again, maybe you came into a role and you had all this pressure and it's the fourth quarter now and you're like, oh my goodness, I've got to get after it. I get that. But if you can back up and start looking at a year-long plan and start creating a schedule where you're not just reaching out to donors and connecting with them when you need to ask them for money or support, and so start building that now. So you may be behind the eight ball, so to speak, now, but think about a year and start mapping out your strategy of how you're going to connect with donors. So it's much more of a you're connecting with them on a regular basis, not just when you need something. And I think then you go back to seeing them as people, you start asking questions. So that's what I would do is just look at your list. How many times have you met with them? When was the last time you met with them? And can you start creating a schedule now to be proactive? And so you're not just coming to them with your open hand and asking for something, because I think donors will notice the difference.
yeah. I love the proactive because we're very good at being reactive in the
Yeah,
fundraising world.
absolutely. The crisis, as
There's
we talked about
always, like
earlier.
you
Yeah.
said, crisis. Go
Yep.
back to the crisis.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, Rob, this has been such a valuable conversation and
Yeah.
so many actionable tips for the audience. But before we wrap up, you have a free gift offer to the audience when you want to
Yeah.
share about that
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to give you kind of my three top ways to improve your fundraising through improving your relationships. So it's just going to be a nice PDF that I can send to you. So I'd love to give that to you. And then I guess I got two. I got benefit of two things. This may be obvious, but I always do this anyway. But if you ever want to kind of lean into what coaching may be like, or even a consulting opportunity, I always give a 30-minute free session for coaching and or consulting of what that would look like and what will you benefit from and how could that maybe be built into your schedule this next year. So those are two offers that I'd love to offer to everybody who's listening.
Oh, wow, that's so amazing. Thank you. Appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing that. And everyone
totally.
watching, take advantage of Rob's free offer. Pick up
Yeah,
his free resource, click the link below, and
yeah,
click the other link and check out what it would be like to work with Rob. If
yeah.
if that's what you think you need to work on with building your relationships. Rob, thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time and offering your
You bet.
insights on fundraising today. You're giving the audience such a wealth of information on how to be
Oh, good.
relational when you're
Yeah,
building those stronger relationships in fundraising. So thank
yeah.
you so much. And to
You bet.
everyone tuning in, don't miss the rest of the Fundraising Breakthrough Summit from our expert insights to help you grow donations, deepen supporter relationships, to help you build financial stability in your nonprofit organization. So thanks for joining us today, and goodbye for now.
Thanks so much.